about 5 years ago, we sort of put our money where our mouth is and said, if we're going to really be thought of as thought leaders out in the world, we need to devote some of our own time and energy, without kind of a client in front of us, without a project immediately in front of us. How can we sort of reach out there a couple steps ahead of maybe where the market is to try to anticipate some things, get some conversations going, move the needle a little bit on the discourse of architecture. And so we started this R&D studio, and that's why the other person is here on the screen. Marissa Kasden heads up our R&D studio for us, and I think we've got maybe a preview. I don't know if this is the first time this has been seen out in the world, but something that we're kind of excited about and is kind of timely here in this pandemic world, and thinking about how office space might transition in the future. Will there be the same level of need for it? Will people be working at home? Are they going to hot desk? What's going to happen? Is there going to be a glut of office space? And if there is a glut of office space, what could we do with that space? And so maybe, Marissa, maybe I just let you take it over and explain what we've come up with, maybe.
Yeah, sure, David. So our new concept that we're just rolling out now, we're calling Flex Flats. And the idea was repurposing conventional office space for residential units. We started to see that some of the office spaces were not performing as well as they maybe could be, especially in certain markets. And often in those markets, they were also experiencing housing shortages. And these were trends that we were seeing well before COVID hit. And then when everybody got shifted to work from home, obviously this was on the forefront of everyone's mind. What does this mean for office space, and how are we going to adapt to this? So we wanted to take a pass at what we thought that might look like. One of the struggles often with converting office space to residential is just the size of the floor plate of that building. It's usually much deeper than what you would typically have for a residential floor plate. If you're thinking a typical residential unit might be 30 to 35 feet deep, and then you have your corridor and then another unit. So you're talking maybe like 70-ish feet deep. A typical office building would be much deeper than that. And so what you get are these sort of interior void spaces near the core of the building. And what do you do with that space? Does it just end up being this dead volume in the middle? And so we wanted to look at what those units might be that could be a more efficient way of using that space. How could those be designed? And then also trying to work in some of the design trends we're seeing in residential design. And for us, what that meant, especially in this post-pandemic world, was how can we create some additional flexibility in those spaces? And how can we adapt to the way that people are using their units? We're having to use our homes in ways that we never imagined that we would. And also just the way that families are growing and changing in ways that maybe our housing isn't adapting to rapidly enough. So being able to create flexibility in the units, and so that became a big component of this as well. So I don't know, would you like me to show some imagery of what we've been working on here?
We're excited to see this, absolutely.
So this is just the exterior of our office space that we used as a prototype building. And as you can see, we tried to affect the exterior of the building as little as possible. We really wanted to see how we could make this be an economic option for being able to convert the office space. So we figured that removing and recreating the exterior facade would probably be a non-starter. So instead, we try to keep the exterior facade as similar to pre-existing as possible. And we did, as you can see, incorporate operable windows just to work better with the residential use. We've also added a residential lobby at the ground floor, and then a small residential amenity on the roof deck.
I see that, yeah. And so, oh wow, okay, so that's kind of the before.
These are the before images of the office space, both before the tenant improvement and then as a functioning office. So you can see it's just a pretty standard office building with a 30-foot column grid and some nice high ceilings. Some of the features of these office spaces make them actually very, they make some really nice residential spaces because you have those high ceilings that you typically don't get in a residential building.
Agreed.
And this is just some diagrams showing what we're proposing to keep and what we would add to those spaces. So the column grid and structural system obviously stays the same. You keep the vertical circulation as is. And then based on this prototype plan, we're seeing that we could get about 14 residential units per level. And so that's working within that 30-foot column grid and then varying the depths of the unit as needed to provide some variation in the unit square footage and bedroom count. And then, as I said before, we added operable windows and then some other residential features just to help serve the community. So this is the pre-existing office plan with the desk layout. And then as we take that away, and then you can see we've put in residential units of varying depths with the fixed width fitting in that column grid. So what that meant for this is that the bedrooms became shifted back into the unit plan as opposed to being out at the exterior window facade.
Right.
So in order to, so I'm going to show you, this is the section and showing how those units work. We have some existing office space on the ground floor and then the residential units above. And as we show this, I should just point out that this is the way that this concept works. You could use this as part of a building with other functions as well. We're showing the top 4 floors as residential, but the way most of our developments work, they're all mixed use in some capacity. So this could vary depending on the needs of the building that you're working with. And then just highlighting one of the units, I'm showing you some of the flexible spaces that I was talking about before, where we're using some sliding walls to partition the spaces, being able to create larger spaces or smaller spaces depending on the function, the need at that moment or for that family. We've also worked in some of the other trends that we're seeing in residential design of those mudroom spaces and package storage spaces that are starting to become more and more important. So here are some views of the inside. And as you can see, those walls move to be able to create some different sized spaces depending on how you need to use them. And then, like I was saying before, you get some really nice high ceilings and some exposed ductwork and some of the elements that you don't normally see in residential design. We also worked in some high windows above the flex spaces so that you can get some additional natural light deeper into the units. That's one of the issues with these deep units is the natural light. So we figured by putting in some high windows, you can help to add some light to deeper within. And then here's just that mudroom I was mentioning, the package drop off right at the front entrance. And those have like a door from both the corridor and the inside of the unit. So management could potentially drop off the packages right at your front door and you can just get them from within your unit. And then another variation that could be used, I mentioned that sometimes those deep spaces near the cores, you end up with some sort of oddball areas.
Right.
And so we worked in like a small lounge at that elevator lobby. It's another way of taking up some space toward the middle of the unit.
Yeah, that's great. Common areas, right, for that floor.
Right. And that space could be programmed in other ways too. One of the other suggestions that we had was it could be rented out as storage lockers for the residents to add a little extra option. So that's the overview of the plan. We also have a short video that we could show.
Yeah, let's do it. Wow, Marissa, that is super awesome. How long have you guys been working on this concept?
Well, we started studying some of these ideas of where we see some of the trends that were happening before COVID that might last longer than just this time right now. As soon as we started going home, but then this concept has been developed over the last few months.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think
John, I might just mention that anytime we're doing the R&D stuff, it's really about the idea. It's not about the exact solution. And although we're showing pretty specific solution to this particular suburban office building, these ideas kind of work in a lot of different settings. Could work in a high rise, could work in other places. And I think that's really what this is about. Is not having anybody look at these plans and go, well, that's not the size of the building that I'm dealing with. We have a little bit bigger one, or we have a little bit smaller one. That's not really the point of this. The point of it's more that it is possible. And so as and maybe it's the folks that you work with, the commercial brokers out there looking at these office buildings, that they're struggling with, how are we ever going to fill this up? The more to the point is, this is possible. This is maybe another arrow in the quiver of possible things that you could do with a building. That's kind of all that we're saying here.